Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bugyan podcast. As you all know very well, we network with industry leaders, with large security engineers, as well as accomplished bug bounty hunters on this podcast. Learn from their experiences and try to implement those in our own life and see how we can improve our own work in the overall cybersecurity space. Today, we have a security leader with us, Swati Sharma. Swati has over a decade of experience in the cybersecurity space, specifically specializing in the governance, risk, and compliance space, which is GRC. Previously, she had worked at an organization called CISA, which many of you must be familiar with. And now she is actually working at Amazon. Uh, in fact, a couple of months back, she was in Amazon Pay, but now she's taking care of the overall global entity operations and leading Amazon as the leader of global security governance. Pleasure to have you here, Swati.
Thank you so much, though. Pleasure interacting with you.
Awesome. So we'll kick right into it, Swati. So this is very interesting for us because this is for the first time we've gotten to interview someone who's working at, of course, such a large company as Amazon, right, which is one of the top 10 companies in the world. We are very curious to understand that, especially in, say, the e-commerce background work of what is going on at Amazon. How is it, or even if we talk about any of the other spaces in Amazon, how is the overall GRC different from any of the other previous companies that you may have worked at, just because of the scale of the company that we are talking about? How does that overall function work?
So I think with Amazon, not just the scale, I think the heterogeneity of the business function itself is a complicated thing.
Right.
When I say heterogeneous, I mean that we have e-commerce business, we have regulated business in the health segment, and we have like regulated payment businesses. We have within e-commerce also we have different segment around the supply chain. Then we have
Mhm.
seller partners. So the diversity within business and the heterogeneity global scale, for example, the regulation that we have to abide with US versus India, there are different
Mhm.
flavors, and on top of that we have scale.
Mhm.
So when we combine this is slightly complex, but within Amazon, we focus on inventing and simplifying things. We also have to keep our pace high. We can't slow down our decision because of the security things, right? So we have to make sure that the security is enabler for business and it's not making a blocker, right? So I think these are some of the key aspects which makes it peculiar in nature. And we have to maintain pace. At the same time, we have to address regulatory security requirements, and we have to make sure that it is aligned with the different segment of businesses that we have within Amazon.
Understood, Swati. Now, that's very, very interesting to hear. Because naturally, yes, when you're operating in so many countries, you'll have to comply with different kinds of laws on different countries, and you'll have to understand which kinds of products are deployed in which countries and what ways. And then, of course, there'll be intersections and so on. So naturally, I can imagine how complex of a role that can get. And then, of course, the scale that comes in makes it even more of a challenging job. Um, Very curious to understand that when you have so many functions, does a CISO or a leader lead each one of these functions separately? And how is the overall structure at Amazon defined so that this kind of a process can be kicked off? And on top of that, would also like to understand how much of this is actually codified. Because a lot of what we are seeing right now in the industry is something called compliance as code, right? Um, is that something that you have seen being implemented to speed up these processes that you're talking about at scale, or is that something that is still being done through people?
Can you define the term on the codification part that you have just
With
mentioned?
regards to codification, I mean that, say, for example, there are many fintech companies in India who have
Mhm.
started this process wherein they've said that, okay, RBI has so many compliances on them that they may be having an audit every week, right? So instead
Right.
of going through that process manually, identifying all those proofs for the audit, they basically just have automatic functions running, which is automatically correcting that data to actually present to the auditors.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'll answer your question in two parts. So one is
Mhm.
the first part of the question is like the security org structure. Because we have complex requirement and the scale is there, the CISO function is also like really peculiar in nature. We have like our central CISO function, and within that we have dedicated business CISO leaders, and then we have CISOs dedicated for the regulated businesses based on the
Mhm.
geography. So there are multiple CISOs based on the business need, and they are taking care of a specific thing. And within those functions also we have subdivided the different security domains, and like each function is taking care of that, which is like really at the scale. Coming back to your second part of the question, like regulatory requirement, compliance requirement, automation versus manual thing, I think if you have to serve something at the Amazon scale, doing
Mhm.
everything manually is like almost next to impossible. So
Correct.
definitely we have to codify, we have to build on the automation, and there is a lot of focus on the process efficiencies, operational
Mhm.
excellence, and we have number of in-house tools which are helping us in doing those automation and innovation. So we are not just doing the compliance piece, we are also building automation on top of that, so that we are we are focusing on the innovation, and the regular day-to-day job can be done with the help of tool or scripts, whatever is the right thing to do.
Understood.
But
Understood.
on the compliance, we have to understand one thing, that we cannot automate everything, right?
Mhm.
Because the crucial piece is interpretation, how RBI
Of
is
course.
drafting some of the requirements, or how Singapore regulator MAS, they have defined their requirements. Someone really needs to understand what exactly their intention is, and what kind of security controls need to be deployed, how evidence need to be collected, and how those need to be provided on regular basis.
Mhm.
So definitely there is human intervention, human intelligence is required. We are building a lot of automation, but it is not eliminating the human judgment or human intervention 100%. We are applying it, but we are applying it on areas where it is required, while the day-to-day thing, the mundane job, can be done by the automation. So I think it's combination. It's not just one versus another, and that's how
Understood.
we
Understood,
are
Swati.
able to do
Now,
that.
that's very interesting. I think that's where, um, large companies have seen implementing AI to come in place, right? Where there are jobs where that actually do require interpretation. In fact, even if you look at the bug bounty space, all in all, the core logic behind it is that, humans think in a very creative and different way and are able to
Exactly.
understand, different kinds of vulnerabilities. So all large companies have a bug bounty program, including Amazon, Google, all kinds of companies, you can say, alongside any of the 100 security vendors that they may have chosen to maybe do an automated level of testing, right? Because that still is something that is in place, and people do look at human intelligence with a strong level of importance. So that is great to hear, and I think AI will be something that will be changing this space quite a lot in the coming days. But still, human intelligence will then becomes important on something else, right?
True.
Um, Swati, my next question is around trying to understand from your perspective now, right? Since you have such a large experience in the overall GRC space, can you tell us, for say a startup or and a large company, right? What are the top three things that need to focus on in their non-technical security function, right? So that they are moving in accordance with laws, and they're not getting scrutinized by either their buyers or the regulators. So what are the top three things that one thing a startup should do and one thing, of course, a large company should be focusing
I think irrespective of fintech or large companies, I don't think so that even the fintech startups or these smaller companies are like safe from the cybersecurity point of view, right?
on?
They are easy target because they may have lesser security controls in the beginning. So I think fundamental should start with what is your asset, right? And what kind
Mhm,
of risk you are facing. For example, if you are at the e-commerce space, obviously you are exposing your website, your application for the like public, right? So obviously the public website sort of risk or the application risk are like key, and you need to address those risks with the
mhm,
appropriate security controls. One fundamental thing that I have been asking people, or whenever I like talk to people, I suggest them that don't go with the fancy security terms, right? Before you talk about AI based security controls, or before you think about something very like sophisticated in nature around the uh, MDRs and all, see whether you have basic controls in place or not. if you look at the top 10 security breaches, they were not breached because they were not like investing in the fancy security tools or solutions. They were breached because someone has done something stupid,
Correct.
and as basic as uh, like using default passwords or
Of course.
clicking on the wrong emails email links. So I think the basic fundamental need to be really tight, and on top
Mhm.
of that you have to build security controls in proportionate to your security risk. Don't do over, then you'll be wasting your resources and you'll be creating blocker for your business. At the same time, do not like ignore security baseline controls, which are like key: user awareness, having a strong password, patching, not
Mhm.
opening unnecessary ports and services. So I think the basics need to be corrected, that need to be in place. On top of that, you can add security solutions, softwares, controls based on a specific security need.
Understood. No, that's very interesting, and I think that's something all CISOs should really look at, right? Because I do understand that a number of people are going directly at, what's the top vendor, give me the best product, and I'm done, right? It's like that. But of course, everybody needs to understand that security isn't like a checklist that you can tick off and call it complete. You need to understand it from a very fundamental level. So, end of identifying that attack surface first, and, mapping all the assets, calculating the risk, and then looking at the basic controls, because we always know that humans are the weakest link in cybersecurity, and most organizations are getting hacked, which you correctly pointed out, because of humans doing stupid things. So that education needs to be imparted first, for sure, and then of course the fundamentals need to be in place. That patching and so on is extremely important, and I think if all companies, regardless of startups, are able to take this up, would be very valuable. I think one point that maybe I would like to add is that for startups, they could go for more open source technologies that could be available, whereas enterprise could go for maybe larger vendors who have deployed solutions so that that can be executed in a faster way. On that end, Swati, very curious to understand from you, um, what are some of the top innovations? Now we're talking about fancy terms, right? That you see in the industry coming up, right? With regards to, maybe Gartner terms, with regards to how you're looking at new security solutions, managing, looking how you're looking at EDRs again, how you're looking at attack surface management again, how you're looking at actually calculating that risk score, right? Which is also something that is very confusing for many people, right? How do I do that? Um, what do you think are the top new innovations in the industry right now that are really helping people get an edge on the malicious hackers?
Sure. I think I would like to call out two areas where I have seen a lot of innovations happening. One
Mhm.
is there are solutions which are helping organizations in maintaining the compliance throughout, so that the compliance is not just happening point in time, right? Or compliance is not something that people are doing as a checklist. So there are
Mhm.
solutions which are helping organizations in meeting security controls throughout, right? It's like continuous compliance, right? So some innovations which are happening in that space, I think that has made life a lot easier for a lot of people, and they can take care of multiple compliance requirements on top of the ongoing work that they do for their organization on regular basis. And second is the innovations which are taking in place for endpoint devices. I think endpoint
Mhm.
devices have been like pain for a lot of organizations, because these devices are in control of like all sort of employees. Some may be security aware, some may not be security aware, and they may be doing a lot of things using those endpoint devices. And those endpoint devices are sometimes connected with your organization infrastructure, sometimes they are working from home. So there's a lot of gap at that particular area. But if you look at some of the innovation that has happened in that area, I think managing endpoint devices are comparatively like a lot easier. And third, if I have to talk about, is the post quantum cryptography, right? I
Mhm.
think everybody acknowledges that the last layer of defense is encryption, or like encrypting your data. If all your controls are failing and if your data is encrypted, you are still safe. But the way processing power is increasing, right? Those algorithms can be broken if the encryption is algorithms are also not keeping the pace with that particular processing power. So I think some good work that is happening in post quantum cryptography space, that is really fascinating, and that's really key for maintaining our security controls, because lot other security controls like your password management or the way the credentials are kept, cryptography has been used as fundamental, right? You hash your passwords and then you keep it safe. If your hashing is not safe, your passwords will not be safe, right? So I think
Got
post
it.
quantum cryptography is another area which is like fascinating and a lot of work is happening.
No, for sure, Swati. I think out of all the companies that I would expect to think about post-quantum cryptography, Amazon would be the top, right? Because you have such a large presence across the globe that the day that quantum cryptography gets broken, you would be one of the largest companies to potentially get impacted to it alongside the others. So it is only logical that you have a contingency plan in place for that and have developed algorithms to actually, um, you know, fight that, right? Have that encryption stronger in place as well, when other companies may not be thinking about this at all. So that's actually very interesting to hear that work on that is something Amazon is strongly looking at. And of course, endpoint devices, we all understand that struggle. Everybody is working from home. Everybody is connecting to their home Wi-Fi. So that's always a curious thing on how exactly CISOs are managing that. So great to hear that you are looking at that as well. And then of course, right, the first thing was all in all that continuous compliance doing an audit shouldn't be an afterthought, right? Coming that where an audit comes, I look at it. But if it's going on in an active way, you're able to present those proofs directly. So that's all great to hear. Um, my next question, Swati, is around you know people who want to enter, say, the GRC space, right? Um, because right now for cybersecurity, many people who do get into the GRC space, maybe are joining in as a consultant and then learning about it from there, right? And then kind of, moving into the cybersecurity space and then kind of working it up over there. Um, Whereas overall in the application security space, which is very popular right now because of bug bounty and all the hackers and so on, right? People are trying to do certifications, right? Say such as OSCP, CEH, and so on. So, in your opinion, what is the best way to, become good in the GRC space and get a role in the GRC space, in, of course, a company? And how would you recommend students who are interested in this space to go about, maybe having an edge over their peers, even when they're joining a compliance-based company, or say a consultancy company, to actually succeed in GRC as a function?
Right. I think my journey was slightly different. I pursued masters in information security and cyber laws, and like my entire career has been in information security domain. But for people who have like not been from that background, I think if you are in a student life, you can definitely go for short duration courses or full time masters, which are overlapping with information security or cyber security courses. If you have crossed that journey, for example, you're already working, I think there are certifications which can be good, like a starting point. For example, if you're looking for a GRC thing, ISO
Mhm.
27001 or CISA can be actually really a good certification. So these are the certifications which will not only give you credential that you can like use to convince your next employer, but it will also help you in gaining the understanding about the subject. That has been really helpful. Even after doing masters, I pursued some of these certification, and I really felt that those certifications have helped me in not building the brand, but understanding the security space better.
Mhm.
So I think is study and continuous study is something which cannot be ignored. So you have to be continuously learning about what's happening in this space, and then build the network, be part of that network,
Mhm.
join conferences, these podcasts or some of these seminars. So it will help you in understanding the upcoming things or the latest buzz in the industry.
Mhm.
And don't feel or don't resist joining a smaller organization. I think sometimes people have this perception that if it's not like big shot or big brand, they don't want to join or even they don't want to consider those roles. But what I have observed and experienced personally, that some of these mid-size or small organizations, they have quality work. and they can help you in gaining the exposure and experience that can help you in getting some of your dream jobs, right?
Mhm.
So start and then learn and grow. So at the starting point, don't resist and don't think too much. Whatever is available, explore that, learn, grow, and iterate on top of that, and keep learning. I think that's the key. Learning, like even today, I go at least once in a year. I go for one certification. So
Mhm.
I look for like what is relevant, and I study, and then I go for certification. So I think you can't stop learning in cybersecurity space. That's not the option at all.
I think that's one thing that we have heard from every leader who's come on this podcast, Swati, that everybody does establish the fact that they have reached the designations and the positions they have in these companies because of the fact that they had that continuous learning philosophy. And you taking a certification every year, even at the position that you are in your career, speaks to that. The amount of effort that people put in to grow in the cybersecurity space. It is certainly not something that comes easy to anyone, right? It does require effort to be put in, but those who do put in the effort do get the results out of it, right? So that is certainly great to hear. And of course, we everybody does acknowledge the value that certifications bring, with regards to credentials as well as an overall fundamental understanding of the space. And then, of course, joining a small company, I still feel is very valuable, right? I still feel at startups, the work that is going on is scrappy, but the level of work that you're able to do being a part of that scrappy company to present something formal, right, is more learning than any other place. There is no, if there isn't an SOP in place, you are actually the person designing that SOP, and you learn so much while doing that, that it has so much value. So I completely agree with that point. Um, and with regards to masters, Swati, just what I want to add a question on top of that. Do you feel that masters in the space that you are today is still relevant? Because what is happening in a lot of conversations right now across the globe is that um, people are saying that why do a master's after a bachelor's, right? Unless you want to get very technical and get into hardcore research. Um, do you feel that looking at a master's after completing your bachelor's is something very important for people today? Or do you feel that, getting into a job and getting started with hands-on training is something valuable? Because this is a question that many people are kind of facing right now and are tackling right
So when you go for heart surgery,
now.
you definitely look for the doctor's credential, right? You look that they have done their MS or
Correct.
not that, right? So you
Correct.
don't want to go to someone who is like completely clueless, right?
Mhm.
I'm not saying that the hands-on experience can replace some of these things. I think this works hands on hand. So you have to gain the theoretical knowledge so that you don't reinvent the wheel.
Correct.
At the same time, you need to gain the actual experience, on ground experience. Some of these certifications or masters, they help you in understanding the fundamentals, the basics, and then you gain experience and you use what you have learned in the class or in certification or in the training. I think both are important, but as I said, right, you will not go to a heart surgeon who is just MBBS, right? So,
And of course, of course.
yeah, so you look for the
Unless you
specialty,
unless you really like the
like
thrill,
treatment.
like the thrill, right? But yeah, of course, I think I understand that. I think the overall message that can go out to everyone who's watching is that if you do have the opportunity to do a master's that can improve your career prospects in the future, it is certainly worth exploring, right? It's not something that you should shun off. Right. But of course, while getting hands-on experience, that can also be done through an internship while you're doing that master's.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
these are always available opportunities. Awesome. Swati, my next question is around humans that we were discussing earlier. So, very curious to understand, say at Amazon or at any of the previous organizations that you've worked at, uh, how do you educate these, of course, your employees as well as your vendors, your contractors who have access to sensitive information, to actually not leak that in an unintentional way if they are being targeted by, say, a phishing campaign or a phishing campaign, or any sort of person kind of tackling them. What kind of um, education trainings or simulations do you take up at Amazon or any of the companies that previously that you've worked at to tackle the human link as of course, a point of compromise.
So I'll talk about the awareness part too, but I
Mhm.
think one portion that is important, that don't give extra information or information which is actually not required. For example, if someone needs just X piece of information, don't give them Y, right? So
Mhm.
sensitive information should be contained, right? It should not, I
Mhm.
mean, it should be accessible to limited people.
Mhm.
So there has to be a tiering of the systems and the information as well. There has to be a classification of information, and everybody should not have access to your highest sensitive information. That has to be restricted and contained in system, and access should be restricted to limited people. Even for those people, right? There has to be technical controls. On top of that, you have process level controls, and then you talk about the awareness piece of it.
Mhm.
And when we are talking about awareness, the need of awareness can be divided into two parts. One is like basic knowledge, like don't share your password and like the regular stuff. Do not write your password, do not click on the link. And the second portion is that very specific to your role, right? For example, someone is DBA accessing your critical information, their security awareness level need to be completely different from a normal user.
Correct.
And then you test it, and the simulations and some of the testing that can actually help you in measuring whatever you are doing, is it working or not. So I think the key takeaways are, before you talk about security awareness and the user aspect, build your technical controls strong enough, do not give access to everyone, limit the critical sensitive information, encrypt the information, do not show clear text data to users if it's not required. Second, your training and awareness need to be like, one can be basic, which is like available for everyone. Second has to be very job specific, role specific. And third, you strengthen your controls on regular basis and test these controls, and through the simulation or other efforts to measure if those controls are working or not.
Understood, Swati. I think that's very interesting because um, just looking at educating users about cybersecurity on its own may be a very large task, but limiting that number of people who you have to educate in a comprehensive way through distributing that data seems like one of the smartest things to do. Why don't more people do that, right? And of course, that's so valuable because you get to um, educate that small number of people in a comprehensive way because they have access to that sensitive data. And then you can, of course, simulate these kinds of simulations and understand how that whole process goes. So that's something very smart that that I've heard actually for the first time. Um, so very curious to understand any of the simulations if you can talk about that go on at Amazon. Do you send out fake mails and so on that many people do, right? Fake
So
phishing
not
phishing
my
emails.
team, not I'm like responsible for that. Yes, there is a team which does
Okay.
this exercise, and they definitely do that. And not just Amazon, I think I have seen this in my previous employers, other
Mhm.
organizations where I was doing consulting, that they do simulation
Mhm.
in terms of sending some emails, triggering
Mhm.
some actions which can actually like create an environment where people are like attracted towards some actions which are like non-desirable, just to test whether
Mhm.
like what kind of decisions employees are taking or third parties are taking.
I know it's always very interesting to kind of hear about this because many of the employees are because scared of the fact that it's a simulation that's in place and I remember one company had basically made a leaderboard and made it public that who is actually clicking on these links and so on, how you do in DEF CON in the US. So because it's something that they look at very critically and want to understand how people are looking how are engaging with these things. Um, so I think we'll wrap it up quickly only. One last question that I have to ask, right? Because of the nature of things and how the world is kind of progressing, which is around AI, right? How does Amazon or you at Amazon look at AI actually coming in the space and changing your role, right? Because certainly it's not something that is like a bubble or can be shrugged off. It is something that is certainly producing valuable outcomes at a fraction of the cost that things were being done before. And that is my takeaway. Very curious to understand how you're looking at AI, how you're looking at it helping it out in your own functions, and how you're looking at it overall improving maybe say some of the products that you might use?
So definitely there are innovations which are happening in AI space, right?
Hmm.
How you are utilizing those innovation, or uh, like what is the desired outcome? If you're clear
Hmm.
about the desired outcome, I think then you will be able to utilize it better.
Correct.
For example, if you have some solution at the like which can help you in generating the questions related to your security concerns. For example, if you're writing an application or building an application and you have question like what all controls need to be deployed there, and if you have a solution, generative AI solution, which can answer you or pull out all the resources which are applicable to your use case, then it's really worth, because then you don't have to ask your builders or software developers to look at the policies in detail. They don't have to like interpret it. So if someone is clear about what is the outcome that they're looking for, I think AI is definitely a tool that can enable them in achieving those objectives. Again, AI can be utilized if you have clear objectives. You cannot just use it for the sake of using it.
Of course. Yes.
And when you're using some of these AI solutions which are built by third parties or in the open source environment, you have to be careful what data you are feeding to them,
Hmm.
right? You cannot share your internal critical information with third party AI solution, because you never know how that information is being like utilized, where it is being like shared. So be cognizant of what solution you're using, what information is going, what objective you have. So I think organizations are working on AI strategies, and they are defining their policies around it, like where it can be utilized, what are the guardrails that need to be around the AI solution, third party and internal solutions as well.
No, I understood. I think that's very important. People may be looking at AI like a buzzword right now, right? That, okay, I want AI in my company, which doesn't make much sense. So looking at it as, solving a business purpose is of course something important. And I understand that that's something that people are still exploring as a part of their company. And one more thing that you pointed out, which was very interesting as well, which is the data that is being sent to these AI vendors, right? Because that needs to be anonymized in a very critical way, because that is being processed by them, and then they are data companies on their own. They might be further going ahead and improving their products or selling those products further using them. So taking care of these things while engaging with an AI is something very valuable. But of course, we all understand that it is something that can add value, but we should have a business outcome on that we want to achieve specified out of it. um, Thank you so much, Swati. This was a pleasure to actually have you here and learn from you, understand how you look at cybersecurity as a space, look at your personal experiences, as well as understand about your kind of experiences at Amazon and the other companies you worked at. Thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much.
It was amazing to interact with you, Dhruv. Thanks a lot for inviting and talking about some of these key aspects in cybersecurity domain. Thank you.